Look up tonight and find any single star. It looks eternal, fixed, permanent. It is not. Every star you have ever seen is quietly losing a war, a slow war against its own gravity which is forever trying to crush it from the inside. For millions of years, the star burns and pushes back and holds the line. But one day, the fuel runs low, the star begins to die, and its entire fate comes down to a single number. So put that dying star on a scale and weigh it. If it comes in under one particular weight, it settles down gently into a small, dense ember that will glow quietly for ages. But if it tips even a little over that line, gravity wins completely, and the star collapses inward on itself, falling toward a neutron star or a black hole. There is a weight no star can survive, and here is the part that should genuinely stop you. That dividing line was not worked out by some gray-haired professor at a great observatory. It was found by a 19-year-old at a ship's railing, with a pencil and a sheet of paper, on a steamship before he had even started university. This young man was named Subrahmanyan Chandrasekhar, and his own fate turned out to be almost as strange as the stars he was weighing. Every dying star, he realized, faces the very same fork, quiet ember on one side of the number, total collapse on the other. Look up at a whole sky of them, and every point of light is holding its breath, waiting to find out which side of the line it lands on. But when he carried this answer into a crowded hall and laid it before the most celebrated astronomer alive, the great man rose to his feet and ridiculed it, to his face, in front of the whole room. The establishment sided with the legend, and the boy was humbled, and eventually left the country. Here's the twist, though. He was right. The legend was wrong. It would take almost 50 years and finally a Nobel Prize for the world to admit that a teenager on a boat had seen the fate of the stars more clearly than anyone. So let me show you the number, and the price he paid for being early. Now let me make this personal, because this is not some abstract fact about faraway suns. Start with the star you actually depend on, the one overhead right now. Our sun is going to die too, and when it does, its fate is already sealed by this exact number. The sun, it turns out, lands comfortably under the line, so its ending is the gentle one. It will swell up, shrug off its outer layers, and leave behind a hot, dense ember roughly the size of the Earth, slowly cooling for billions of years. No collapse, no black hole, just a quiet white ember where a star used to be. But that is only because of how much the sun weighs. It is, in the grand scheme, a fairly ordinary, middling star. Take a star noticeably heavier, push it past that same weight, and its story ends violently instead of gently. So the next time you feel sunlight on your skin, sit with this: the calm little ember your sun is destined to become, and the catastrophe a heavier star is destined for, are two sides of one number a 19-year-old scribbled on a boat. And it is not just our sun. Go outside on a clear night and take in the whole sky. Every one of those stars is running the same losing war. While a star is alive, it is a furnace, burning fuel to push outward and hold gravity off. But every furnace runs out, and when the fire finally goes out, the star is left with nothing but its own weight, and it walks up to a fork with two doors. Which door it takes, gentle ember or violent collapse, is decided by one thing only: how heavy it is compared to that invisible line drawn across the sky. Line up stars by weight, from the lightweights to the giants, and somewhere in that lineup sits a hard, sharp boundary. Below it, you get a white ember. Above it, you get a collapse towards something far stranger. So this single number is quietly a rule that governs the death of nearly everything in the sky. And the astonishing thing is where it was first written down, and by whom. In the summer of 1930, a teenager boarded a steamship to sail from India to England, leaving home to begin his studies at Cambridge. He came from a family that took science seriously. His own uncle had already won a Nobel Prize, and this young scholar was the kind who could not sit still on a long voyage. He had his books, he had a notebook open on the deck, and to pass the weeks he began turning over a puzzle about dead stars. Two great ideas of the new physics were rattling around in his head. One was the strange quantum rulebook of tiny particles. The other was Einstein's relativity. Almost nobody had thought to bring the two together and ask what happens inside the crushed core of a dying star. He did, working through the mathematics by hand, watching the stars wheel past the porthole at night. He followed the logic to a clean, hard result. There was a maximum weight a dead star could hold up. Above it, the math simply gave out. Picture what that means for a moment. Before this boy had sat a single university exam, before he had walked into a lecture at Cambridge, He had arrived on the far side of the world carrying a genuine bombshell in his notebook. Now, I want to be fair and careful here, because good stories get sloppy with credit. He was not the very first person ever to suspect a dead star might have a mass ceiling. A little earlier, physicists named Edmund Stoner and Wilhelm Anderson had glimpsed the outline of such a limit. What this young man did, alone at his desk lamp, was the hard, complete version, the one that fully folded in Einstein's relativity and treated the star properly. His is the definitive calculation, and that is why the number carries his name. The core insight, the thing that makes the whole thing tick, comes down to a beautiful question about how a dead star holds itself up at all, when its fire has gone out and there is nothing left to burn. To see why there has to be a limit, you have to look at what is actually pushing back against gravity in there, and it is one of the strangest forces in nature. So a star runs out of fuel, the fire dies, and gravity keeps squeezing the core inward. Nothing is burning anymore. So what on earth is holding it up? The answer is one of the weirdest rules in physics. Down at the smallest scale, the electrons inside that dead core obey a strict quantum law. No two of them are allowed to crowd into the exact same state. Think of it like a theater, where every seat can hold exactly one person, and no one is allowed to share. As gravity tries to pack the electrons tighter and tighter, they are forced to fill every available seat, and once the seats are full, they simply refuse to be squeezed any closer. That refusal pushes back outward with real force. It is not heat, and it is not electric charge. It is pure quantum stubbornness, and physicists call it degeneracy pressure. For a lighter dead star, that stubbornness wins the standoff. Gravity pulls in, the crammed electrons push back, the two settle into a truce, and you get a stable white ember that can last essentially forever. So far, so safe. But now watch what happens when you make the star heavier. Pile more mass onto that dead star, and gravity squeezes harder, so the electrons are forced to jostle faster and faster to keep their spacing. And here is the trap that the young man on the ship spotted. Those electrons cannot speed up forever, because nothing can outrun light. As they crowd up against that cosmic speed limit, relativity changes the deal, and their outward push stops growing fast enough to keep up. The support that was so unbreakable a moment ago hits a ceiling. Add enough weight, and the pushback simply cannot match gravity anymore. There is no truce left to be had. The core loses the standoff and falls. That tipping point, the heaviest a dead star can possibly be, and still hold itself up, is the line. Weigh in above it, and you are crushed straight past the ember stage, down toward a neutron star or a black hole. It sits at about 1.5 times the weight of our sun, and that number, worked out by a teenager, is what the greatest astronomer of the age refused to accept. Fast forward to a winter evening in London, 1935. Chandra, now a young researcher, stands up at a meeting of the Royal Astronomical Society, the grand gathering of the astronomy world, to present his result. He has done the work carefully. He lays the finding out on the board, and he sits, expecting the ordinary give and take of science. Instead, the most famous astronomer alive rises to speak. His name was Arthur Eddington, and at that moment he was a towering figure, the man who had helped prove Einstein right, revered across the field. And Eddington does not politely disagree. He dismisses the young man's work as nonsense, declaring that there simply must be some law of nature to stop a star from behaving in such an absurd way. In front of the whole room, the legend crosses out the boy's answer, and the room, deferring to his enormous authority, goes with him. Imagine being that young, that far from home, and having the giant of your entire field stand up and treat your careful discovery as an embarrassment. And I want to be honest with you here, because it is tempting to cast Eddington as a simple villain, and he was not one. He was sincere. He genuinely believed the young man's conclusion led somewhere impossible, and his objection came from real conviction, not malice. But sincere or not, he was wrong, and his enormous stature meant the whole field followed him. The applause went to the elder, and the young man was left standing alone with a truth nobody would accept. Chandra was crushed by it. He did not scream conspiracy or wage a public feud. He simply, quietly moved on. He packed up his work on stellar collapse, eventually left Britain altogether, and crossed the ocean to the United States, where he built a long and brilliant career at an observatory outside Chicago. He turned his mind to other problems and largely let the limit rest. But the universe, it turns out, does not care who is famous and who is young. The universe had already decided who was right. It just took the rest of us a shockingly long time to catch up. And catch up we did, slowly, magnificently, on every single point. Astronomers went looking, and out in the sky they found dying stars collapsing in exactly the two ways the math demanded. Below his line, the calm white embers. Above it, the violent endings. They confirmed that heavy cores really do crush themselves down into unimaginably dense neutron stars, a whole sun packed into a city, and that the very heaviest collapse further still, toward black holes. And when they surveyed the white embers scattered across the galaxy and weighed them one by one, not a single one came in above his line. The boundary was real, exactly where he said it would be. There is even a spectacular twist. A dead ember that slowly gains weight until it touches that limit does not go quietly, it detonates as one of the brightest explosions in the cosmos. And because every one of those explosions goes off at the same critical weight, they all shine with nearly the same brightness, which makes them perfect cosmic measuring sticks. Astronomers use them to weigh the universe itself, and to discover that it is flying apart faster and faster. So the number he found on a steamship at 19 quietly became one of the load-bearing pillars of modern astronomy. And year by year, decade by decade, the field that had laughed slowly came around. Finally, in 1983, almost 50 years after that humiliating night in London, Chandrasekhar was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for exactly this line of work, the structure and fate of the stars. By then he was an old man, long vindicated, honored around the world. And notice what this story is and what it is not. This is not a man robbed forever and forgotten. He won the highest prize in his field and lived to see his once ridiculed idea become textbook truth. But it is a story of a brilliant young outsider who was right, and who had to wait half a century and endure being humiliated by a legend before the rest of the world was willing to say so. Being right too early, it turns out, can cost you almost as much as being wrong. So go back outside on the next clear night and look up one more time. Only now you carry the secret folded into that view. Every star you can see is holding itself up against its own gravity, and every one of them will one day lose. And when each does, a single number, written into the sky long before there was anyone to read it, will decide its ending. Your own sun will settle into a quiet ember. Somewhere out there, a heavier star will fold itself into a black hole. That invisible scale is still weighing every star in the sky, exactly as a homesick teenager said it would, alone on a boat with a pencil. His name was Subrahmanyan Chandrasekhar, and today there is a great telescope in space that carries his name, watching the very deaths he described. So the next time someone points at a star and calls it eternal, you can smile and tell them the truth. Nothing up there is eternal. Everything up there is being weighed, and a boy the world laughed at read the scale first. If Chandra's story stayed with you, do me a small favor. Like this video, subscribe to follow the rest of these, and tell me in the comments whose forgotten story I should draw next. There are so many of them, still waiting for someone to finally say they were right.